Sir Desmond, on to the vaccine as well, that many people feel that they are being coerced now into a medical procedure. We were told, again, with the vaccination, and many people have concerns around the vaccination, if they're under 50, that this would be for the vulnerable. We're now hearing that children will be offered and obliged to take part in the vaccination programme. Chris Whitty said yesterday children aren't affected by this, but they should still take the vaccine. Does that not, again, not make people worry about what is going on?
Well, I'm a vaccine enthusiast. My arm is like a pincushion. Ever since I was a child, because my parents were abroad, and even children in my generation had polio jabs and BCG and all sorts of jabs. But I, because I was traveling abroad, had any number of jabs. And that's been the reality of my life, both also as a soldier. I even had a jabs for certain chemical weapons, biological weapons. And so I've no fear of vaccination. But I entirely understand that people have a reluctance to be vaccinated. It's a matter of choice. And if we want, and I certainly believe we do need to persuade people to be vaccinated in order to acquire the herd immunity that we want in order to enjoy normal life. And that's what I want. I see the vaccination program as my passport to normality, not a requirement to carry a passport. I'm all in favor of incentivizing people and persuading people to have a vaccine. What strikes me as absurd that we always seem to reach for the stick, trying to coerce people into having a vaccine, threatening them with having a passport that will enable them enable people to turn them away from a pub or a restaurant or a cinema or something. That strikes me as playing into the very conspiracy theory that we're concerned about. If you have any notion of coercion, people will immediately start to wonder why. If you want to persuade young people to have a jab, but
even by the government's own science, it doesn't stop people catching or spreading it. Children do not get affected by this. The vast majority of people who have died have been over the age of 80 or have had pre-existing health conditions. This is causing people a lot of worry, Sir Desmond. People are starting to worry. And I don't think, like, as you say, with a stick, people are not happy about this. Now, as I said, we have that side of the debate, which then leads us on to the vaccine passports. Now, I believe in choice. I believe that people have a right to choose whether or not to take a medical procedure or a treatment. That is a free society. However, with the threat of these vaccine passports, people are now being coerced. And that is a dangerous route for the state to go down.
Well, they're not being coerced yet. Remember, it hasn't happened yet. This battle isn't over yet. But I accept your point. I remain of the view that I want to see as many people persuaded to take the vaccine as possible. But I agree with you that it should remain a matter of choice. And if we're worried that not enough people are making the right choice, then you've got to have public information, persuasion, and even incentivize certain groups of people to have it in some way, but not to coerce them, not to threaten us. But it's not just, you see, it's not just the coercion of those people who are not prepared to have the vaccine. What about me? I've had the vaccine, I've had my first dose, and I will rush with enthusiasm to have my second. But hold on a minute. Why am I going to be required to show my bona fides if I want to get into a pub or a restaurant or whatever? Or more importantly, let's face it, what happens when it comes to the school concert or the carol service and all those things? I can see this thing mushrooming throughout every aspect of our social lives unless we're careful. It will become a form of identity card. And once it assumes that, it'll be too useful to the government and we'll virtually never get rid of it.
No, and it will. No, and it will lead to a social credit score system, and we will end up like communist China. And the thing is, Sir Desmond, I'm happy to personally picket and boycott businesses that engage in medical apartheid, and there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that will do the same. It is reaching a point where people in this country will simply stop complying. And I think the government needs to know that. It's not. As I said, I'm not threatening a violent uprising or revolution. But what I'm saying is there is going to be millions upon millions of people in this country that are just going to opt out of the system. Is that the kind of country we want to live in?
It's not the country I want to live in. And as I say, this battle isn't over yet. I don't know about the numbers, whether you're talking about millions. Certainly the opinion polling so far has been very much in favour.
Rigged. The opinion polls are rigged, Sir Desmond. You know that. They are rigged. They are rigged.
I remain a vaccination enthusiast, but it must be voluntary. And the difficulty you will have is if you hand this over to a free market, as you've suggested, that you can just boycott those pubs that require you to have a certificate and go to those that don't. If the government makes the use of this application a means of reducing the demands for the physical distancing of your customers, of course, every pub is going to have to go that way, because the reality is they find it very, very difficult to make a profit with the physical limitations that have been imposed on them. So the moment you turn around to pubs and say, well, this is up to you to enforce if you wish. But of course, if you don't wish, you will still have to live with the physical constraints that we've imposed upon your customers and their spacing. Then, effectively, you're going to exclude people who haven't got the bona fides of their vaccination certificate or whatever from that kind of venue.
Desmond, businesses don't need to make a profit anymore. The Bank of England will just create the money, or will just borrow it. I mean, you guys stood on a platform that you couldn't let John McDonnell become the Chancellor because he would destroy the public finances. Our debt's at 2.16 trillion. The Bank of England's created 300 billion in fake money. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. This is like modern monetary theory.
And we'll be paying for it for a long time. There's no question about it.
And again, I don't think people have really got the...
to allow people to trade rather than have to rely on subsidy. But the reality is, as it's all very well saying that the Bank of England has paid for all this. All these enterprises are on their uppers at the end of their tether. The notion that the modest grants that have been paid to them will somehow prevent them from going bust unless they're allowed to trade normally is for the birds. The economy will collapse unless we get back to normal.
Correct.
And by normal, I mean not having
an economy is built on goods and services. It's not built on money. And look, Venezuela tried it. But back to the vax passport, Sir Desmond. Evidence is now coming out in The Guardian today that as early as December, the government was preparing for vaccine passports. Nadine Zahawi, Boris Johnson went on national television to say there are no plans for vaccine passports, that it's totally un-British. Boris Johnson, Sir Desmond, is coming across now as a pathological liar.
Well, I don't accept that there's any lies being told. The reality is that, there are possibilities. Whether possibilities amount to plans are another matter. This matter will come before Parliament. Nothing is decided yet. This battle isn't over.
No, it's not. But as I said, Desmond, the amount of emails I receive from people that say, well, I've just gone and taken the vaccine because it means I can go on holiday. And what I say to people is, look, I want you to make your medical choices. And I believe in personal freedom and choice. But it's not the right decision to take medical procedures based on getting to go on holiday, because that is a very slippery slope to go down, Desmond.
In the same way that I have had to show my yellow fever vaccination certificate when I have entered.
Okay. What's the mortality rate of yellow fever? What's the mortality rate of yellow fever?
No idea.
50%. What's the mortality rate of COVID-19?
Well,
0.3%. This is not yellow fever. There has been 2.7 million global deaths. 2.7. This is not yellow fever.
But that is not our decision. That is being imposed. That is likely to be imposed by the countries receiving you.
So what? This is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We used to stand up for our citizens.
Unless you've been vaccinated, it's that you will not be able to get into so many of those destinations because you've been vaccinated. Now, my view is that vaccination must remain a matter of choice.
Correct.
But clearly, we can't legislate for what other countries do and the requirements that they impose on our travellers.
Sir Desmond, again, just to step back, 2.7 million global deaths, 127 deaths in the 7,000 deaths in the United Kingdom, based on within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 death. Sir Desmond, this isn't the Black Death. This is not the bubonic plague. In the grand scheme of illnesses that we've had, this really, again, we look at this, we look at the history of viruses and the infringement on our freedoms, the steps that governments are taking, and our little minds start wandering. And again, the BBC are like, why are you questioning anything? Well, the numbers just don't add up.
Well, I've said exactly that in Parliament. Those are almost my words. That I've said over the last year. But we are where we are now, and the way out, the quickest way out of this problem is the success of the vaccination programme.
31 million people have received it, Sir Desmond, though. 31 million have had it, and we're still told that's not enough.
But that's there I agree with you. The figures clearly show the reduction in hospital admissions, the reduction in transmission, and the reduction in the number of cases clearly show that we should have been opening up our economy much earlier. The emergency is over. I always questioned the measures that were taken throughout that emergency. But nevertheless, we now need to get back to normal. And normal is not having to test yourself twice a week or show a vaccine certificate every time that you want to get into some public place or venue.
Sir Desmond, I agree with you. And can I just say something as well? Out of all the parliamentarians, you have been one of the very few that has consistently offered an opposition. And whilst we may not agree with everything that you've done a brilliant job. So is Sir Charles Walker. Yet again, you have found yourself smeared and lied about by the mainstream media. There are questions about how we proceed as a country, whether as a country we tolerate diverse opinions and civilised debate, because this is not a healthy country we are becoming, Sir Desmond, and that worries a lot of people.
Well, it worries me, the fact that we behaved in this way and that that we've imposed a lockdown for the best, or for on and off for the best part of a year, and that has shown governments that they can do these things without there being a particularly high level of protest and outrage, and that does worry me for the future. And I certainly want to see that come out of the lessons that we learn about this pandemic. I fear that we may learn all sorts of the wrong lessons. But as I say, we are still a democracy. These matters will come before Parliament, and we will make the case.
So Desmond, as I said, for me, the line in the sand is the vaccine passports. I will not sit back and allow people to be discriminated against on health decisions. And for many people as well, that really is a line in the sand. And likewise, again, if they decide to extend the Coronavirus Act in September for another 6 months, that is another line in the sand. And whilst many people have been of good nature, many people have, accepted what has happened, I think you will notice a major pushback from the populace if they do try and force the vax passports through, and if they try and extend the Coronavirus Act again in September.
Well, as I say, this battle isn't over. These questions will be fought out over the next few weeks and months, and my hope is that as the problem of the infection diminishes, so public appetite for these restraints and constraints on their liberty will diminish, and their determination to see them ended will rise. The problem has been so far is that the government is certainly under the impression that it has general support for the measures that it's taken, notwithstanding that they're imposed by the likes of me. My perception is that that will change as the nature of the emergency diminishes.
And it is changing rapidly. And again, Desmond, another issue is, why the hell is Michael Gove having meetings with Tony Blair about vaccine passports? What's that all about?
I have no idea. And I have no idea what Tony Blair could bring to the table.
Well, and last night's title of the show was "You voted Boris and got Blair," and this is the thing for a lot of people. You're the Conservative Party, small government, individual liberty, personal freedom. This is like Blairism on steroids.
Well, as I say, I will continue to make the case for a return to our liberties and to, I think in the longer term, to put down guarantees that this cannot be allowed to happen again.
Correct.
These are battles that we have to have in Parliament.
And Sir Desmond as well, last night on that briefing they were asking about Chile. Why did nobody ask Whitty, Valance and Boris, well, what about Texas? What about Florida? What about Governor Ron DeSantis? Look at the brilliant job Ron DeSantis has done in Florida. The vast majority of the population out there who just get their information from the BBC and Sky don't know that Florida chose a different route and actually have had better outcomes.
If you take the country that imposed the severest lockdown, Peru, it did particularly badly.
Yes.
And the difficulty with these international comparisons is actually comparing like with like. But nevertheless, I do take the view that lockdowns have a particularly poor record, and that I signed the Great Barrington Declaration, much earlier. I believe that were better ways of going about this. But we are where we are now.
And Sir Desmond, though,
it seems to me that the vaccination programme is our route out. And anything that impedes that, be it a vaccination passport or continuing of social distancing, strikes me as an outrage.
But my argument is, Sir Desmond, they've done this from the start. And I remember when all this first broke, Chris Whitty, Patrick Vallance and Boris Johnson said, look, let's not panic. We don't need to panic about this. Then, now look at where we are. I'm old enough to remember that. Now look at Whitty and Vallance. Look at the doom that they produce. I mean, we had a sensible strategy, and we say this a lot, Sir Desmond. See, in 10 years' time, nobody will have been in support of lockdowns. Everyone, this will be the equivalent of, I was never a member of the Nazi Party, or I was just a low-ranking communist. Nobody in 10 years will admit to being part of this.
I hope you're right. I hope that that's true. My fear is that governments in the Western world have learned a powerful lesson, namely that actually they can do these things and people don't mind too much. They haven't protested a great deal about their loss of their liberty. And that's my fear. is that
Well,
we're in that.
Again, Sir Desmond, people
they had anything to do with it. Bring it on.
People did actually do that, and then they found themselves getting cracked in the head by the Met Police and getting booted off social media and threatened with arrest. Sir Desmond, I know you're busy and you've got to go, but I want to have your comment on the scenes in the church in London last week when the Met Police stopped a mass in London.
Haven't you read my blog?
What? I haven't. But tell me what your opinion on it is.
In my blog, I was in a state of apoplectic rage when I saw that footage. And the reality is, we're not talking about some illegal rave. We're talking about a church service. And what I continued to be angry about throughout this pandemic is the way that guidance has been confused with regulation. Yep. Guidance is no more than the opinion of ministers. It is not for the police to enforce guidance. If police end up enforcing the opinions of ministers, we have become a police state. We live under the rule of law. Only the regulations should be enforced. There is no limit in regulation placed on the number of people who can attend a church service. It is a matter for the size of the church, for the risk assessment that the church authorities themselves make. So in my view, the police well exceeded their authority. And I've seen this in footage throughout the pandemic.
Yeah,
where
they have.
People have been told that they were only allowed out once a day to do an hour's exercise. That's complete nonsense. You could spend your whole day exercising or go out to exercise any number of times.
And again, Sir Desmond, another thing the government, and this is my argument about social cohesion starting to break down. You had the issue at Batley Primary School where that teacher was thrown under a bus for following the curriculum. I know you've spoken out about this. We didn't see the police going in heavy-handed there. We didn't see the police handing out fines there. A lot of people are starting to think there's a two-tier system of policing in this country.
Well, we've certainly seen elements of that throughout the pandemic in the way that those demonstrations that you referred to yourself that have been about the very nature of the regulations that we've been placed
under. Destroyed.
They've been very much heavily handed policed and virtually ignored by the public media. But there it is.
And Sir Desmond, again,
other demands on my time.
Well, just in a closing point is, I think Boris, Whitty, Valens, Hancock are living in a bunker. This is like April 1945 when the Russians are ready to but the Fifth Army's going to come. I think you've got a situation where this country could very easily spiral out of control very, very quickly because people are bored. People have had enough of this. The economy is flatlining. People are lacking hope. We need to get life back to normal because this is not sustainable.
Well, I certainly agree with you in that we need to get people back to life back to normal. And normal, in my view, certainly does not involve having to produce your vaccination bona fides when you want to go about your perfectly lawful business.
Good for you, Desmond. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.